Hi guys, and welcome to another tutorial. Today I'm going to teach you how to draw faces, specifically a man and a woman's face and the difference between the two. It is in profile, and later on I will show you how to draw them in different angles. But you'll see I've already got two lightly mapped out face shapes, and the man's face has got a more pronounced jaw, and you'll see the difference as we go. Firstly, it's important to know that you need to map out the proportions of your face if you want it to look like something human. So the face is divided into thirds between the forehead, the eyebrows, the nose, and the jaw. So you can see I've already done that. And then we're starting with the nose first of all, and we'll jump around a lot because as you build up a face, it's important to have multiple reference points and keep things in check constantly. It's very easy to mess it up, especially if you're drawing from imagination. So I am drawing these without reference today, so they might look a little bit weird as we go, something leaning closer towards uncanny valley, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so first of all, the man's cheekbones are pretty pronounced. I want him to have like a very strong face, and then we work on the eyebrows. So I'm working on the most prominent features first, the things that are going to really define the face. You'll see it's a very generic looking character at first. His nose is a little bit big, but overall I've kept it looking something more like a mannequin, and then later on we're going to make it look a little bit more like a character. The jaw of the man is a lot stronger again, and yeah. If you guys want to see other tutorials of each part of the face, I'm going to leave a poll up on the right, and you can vote which one you would like to see. Would you prefer to see me show you how to draw a nose, how to draw eyes, how to draw lips, how to draw ears? Which one do you want to see first? I'll go through all of them over time, but yeah. Otherwise, another important thing to note between a man and a woman is that their necks are different thicknesses. I haven't drawn it yet, but I will show you just now. A man's neck tends to be around the width of his jaw as well, whereas a woman's neck is slightly thinner. Okay, so now we're starting with the eyes. It's important as well with the eyes. The distance between the eyes is the same width as the eyes themselves. So you mark that, or I mark that with like very small lines just to figure it out. And you can take the center of the eyes as well and draw down and find the edges of the mouth. Lastly, with the eyes for a man, I try to use a few more blocky shapes. I want it to feel solid and square, whereas a woman, I use more like rounded curves. To the ears, same thing with the ears. There are proportions to them. The distance from the nose to the top of the eyebrows, that is the length or the height of the ears. Okay, and then next thing, just going up the side of the head and drawing the forehead and some hair features. I won't focus too much on the hair for my characters because that's not the main focal point. The thing I'm trying to teach you is just how to create faces. So the main things to focus on are those proportions. So the face divided up into thirds. The ears are the same distance as the nose to the top of the eyebrows. The eyes, the distance between them is the same width as the eyes themselves. So it's just important to remember all those things when you're drawing. It does take a lot of practice, so the best thing you can do is do a lot of portrait studies. And when you're drawing the portraits, try to look for the proportions and try to look for where the things match up. Try to see if you can see where the eyes come down and the center meets the mouth. Try to see if you can find that distance between the ear or the height of the ears matching the eyebrows and the nose. Look for those proportions, those standout things. It'll make it much easier for you to draw a face. And when you're drawing faces, it's also important to understand the anatomy. So I've studied the underlying anatomy, and what I'm doing now is blocking them in. So with the nose, there's a lot of cartilage on the nose. You'll see the nostrils and the front of the nose are mainly cartilage, and then there's a lot of bone, and I've done like a diamond shape with that and kind of outlined the underlying structure of the bone. And now I'm going to draw the mouth. So you'll see that's the center of the eyes makes the edges of the mouth. There are also like little bubbly shapes on the edge of the mouth. When you're shading that in, it's really important just to add that. It adds a little bit more detail and depth and realism to your picture. With the lips for a man, when you're shading the lips, the bottom lip is kind of left very plain and the top lip is left in shadow. and you focus more on shading underneath the lip for a man, or underneath his bottom lip. That really brings it out. With a woman, it's a little bit different. You tend to shade both the lips and put a little bit more detail into it, since women tend to have more like pronounced and plump lips, whereas men tend to have thinner lips. Now, there are outliers, and if you do a portrait study with somebody who has unusual features, pay attention to those and try to bring them out the most. Okay, so with this guy, I played around a lot with what I wanted. You'll see later on I add a little scar and I twisted some features, and it's okay to go back and forth and to erase things and try again and move things around. You'll see as I went on, I noticed there were a few problems with my proportions, and again I erased them and start over. There's nothing wrong with that. Especially with the jaw for this guy, I wanted it to feel really pronounced, even though he's a generic looking character and a lot of his facial features are going to be pretty symmetrical at first. Still trying to give him some peculiarities. He's got a very big nose for starters, like a huge nose. It's like anyways, with the eyes, now I've done the outlines. So something that's really important about the eyes that you need to remember is that the actual eyes themselves are spheres, and then they're covered by eyelids. So when you shade them, depending on where the light comes from, you're going to think of it as a sphere. Or what you can do is divide the eye up into vertical thirds, and then you shade each third darker than the next depending on the direction of the light. So you'll see here I'm busy outlining where that sphere would be underneath and where the eye meets. So usually with the iris or the pupil, the iris and the pupil, the iris is covered by the eyelids. It takes up a lot of the eye. Even though a lot of people tend to draw the iris that it's like within that white of the eye, you want the eyelids covering it. Otherwise it just looks like the person's crazy or they're in shock. So yeah, avoid that. You also don't want the eyelids to cover the half of the iris, otherwise it's going to make them look like they're either very dead or like they're half asleep. If that's what you're going for, do that. But there is so much expression in the eyes, and it can be tough to get them 100% if you don't pay attention to these things. So it's a lot of playing around and moving a line and trying a new thing. Also, another thing to note is that the top eyelid is going to leave a drop shadow on the eye if your angle of light is from the top. And mine is going to be like that later, so the top eyelid is a little bit darker. Then for the eyebrows and the eyebrow hairs and stuff, I guess that's kind of the same thing. I kind of just made them, generic, simple lines. But another thing to notice is that the bridge of the nose kind of pushes forward, or not the bridge, the space between your eyebrows and your forehead. It has a sort of forward push, and then the bridge of your nose pushes out. So there's kind of like an indentation there, and if you add that in, it adds another level of realism to your character. As for the ears, drawing them from the front, it can be simple. I tend to leave them faded out because they're not my focal point. You'll see that I do that a little bit later. And I'll also draw an ear tutorial down the line. So you can vote if you want that next week, or if you want that in 2 weeks from now, or if you want that to be the video that you see next. Otherwise I could focus on eyes or the mouth or a face in profile. Okay, so next things, let's see, finish up the ears a little bit and tidy them there. There are a lot of muscles that kind of pull off of your cheekbone down to the edge or the corner of your mouth. So when you're smiling, or when you're frowning, or if you're making a face, those are the muscles that pull. And when you're drawing, there's also a lot of fat and skin around that. So you'll see later on, as I shade in my characters, I'm fleshing out those muscles. Anyways, so I'm going to carry on with the hair here, and then we'll move on to the woman. As I said, I'm not going to focus too much on the hair, but it's still cool to, give the overall flow, and especially with hair, you also treat it like it has planes and faces. So we've spoken about form and shape before. With hair, you start off treating it like a simple form. You don't want to draw each individual hair, and you're not trying to capture every strand. Okay, so now we move on to the woman. Her cheeks are still going to be kind of pronounced for a woman, but a lot less than the man's. And her nose is also effeminate. So the difference there is women tend to have button noses, whereas a masculine nose is a lot more prominent and it's very strong. Women's noses tend to be a little bit more in and soft, as with all their features. You'll see the jaw also comes in more than the man's, and the front of her jaw is thinner than the man's as well. Let's go over there and fix that. If you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask, you're free to leave things down in the comments. How do you do this, or what do you do here, or things that you struggle with as a fellow artist, or just like somebody who does it as a hobby. Leave a comment down below. I'd be happy to hear what you think. If you think my drawings are crap, you can tell me that too. I don't mind. But yeah, going on with the nose. With the woman, you also tend to not outline as much. There's a lot less. So I had to really fight the urge to add too much detail to this woman's face, but you can still make a very blocked out and fleshed out female character without making her look like she's 80 years old. It's like you gotta be really careful with that. If you add too many lines on your woman, you can add more lines on a man, and it just makes him look more prominent. But when you do that with a woman, it looks like she's very advanced in years. Same with, so you'll see with the difference between the man and the woman's eyebrows is where a man's are more square shaped and it's very much more like sharp edges. The woman's are much softer and more curved. And you'll see everything kind of feels like a circle. A lot of circles on women, whereas men are a lot of squares. That's the way I see it, at least. When I'm drawing my male characters, I build them up with squares. When I'm building up my female characters, I build them up with circles, and it gives them like a very different feel. It really defines, or it makes a greater difference when you're looking at them. Even if they're in silhouette, you can tell, okay, that's a man, that's a woman. So yeah, let me know if you guys do different things. Like, what's your method for drawing? How do you start your drawing? Do you block things in, or do you just start from the left and go to the right, kind of like a copy machine? I can't do that. I've never been able to. I way more prefer to block everything out, and I think of drawing kind of like sculpting. You start off with this mass, or this, so it's an idea, and you bring it out, and you use your line to slowly define things, and you pull it out, and you pull it out, and eventually you've got what you want. So I know there are different approaches to drawing, and a lot of people do different things, so I would love to hear how you start your drawings. If it's the same, awesome. If it's different, explain it in detail, please. So with the woman's lips, as I said before, a woman's lips are a bit more prominent than a man's, but I'm also going to shade that under area. If I draw a character in profile, you'll notice that the top lip is further forward than the bottom lip, and that's a lot where shading can help as well. So back to the eyes. Again, the woman's eyes are more rounded, and so are her eyelids. I struggled a little bit with the eyelids here because since I'm right-handed, working on the left eye is my weak point. With the right eye, it's easy to pull those lines over, but with the left eye, it's in the opposite direction, and you're kind of doing a mirrored thing, so it can be a little bit tough at times. Let me know which part of the face you struggle with most. Like, what's the thing you hate to draw? Like, is it the nose or the ears? Like, which thing do you try to avoid drawing? Take, for example, Van Gogh. He cut off his ear for his painting, although there are a lot of stories speculated around that. So art history is pretty interesting. Also, let me know if you're into art history and stuff. As for the facial features that I try to avoid, I don't avoid them anymore. I used to have weak points and I would try to avoid drawing them, but I realized that by taking the time to actually focus on your weak point, you can strengthen it and turn it into the thing that you're best at. For example, I used to suck at drawing lips, and I used to draw a lot of God of War, and Kratos has very interesting lips, or like the younger Kratos, and it's from studying that I actually learned, like, okay, bottom lip, don't shade it in too much, and it's the same with everything. You know, if you work on your weak points in art, eventually you get to the point where you're going to be an amazing artist. But if you spend your whole life avoiding them, you're never going to grow as an artist. So definitely deep dive into whatever facial feature you suck at and whichever one you hate. You're going to eventually love it. So back to the hair with the woman. It's going to be similar to the man's. I was thinking of giving her a short haircut, but I decided against it in the end. I wanted them to look as similar as possible while also being dissimilar in their facial features. Right now you can see there are two very generic characters and they're almost mirror images. If the man were a woman, I would hope that that would be how he looked. But then, yeah, like I said, later on I added a few hanging pieces just to give her a little bit more character. So the last thing we're going to draw is the neck. So see with the man, his neck starts kind of behind his ears or the same width of his jaw, whereas the woman's is a little bit more in, it's a little bit thinner. You want it to look more effeminate. Two muscles or one group of muscles that you can focus on when you're drawing the neck is the sternocleidomastoid. So that starts at the back of the ear and comes down to the collarbone. You'll see when I shade it in how it makes a difference. When the neck turns, each side expands and stretches, or stretches and contracts respectively. Anyways, in the meantime, I'm going to shade in and add a little more character to these faces, make them look a little less generic. While I'm doing that, if you like this video and you've enjoyed it so far and you found it useful, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment below. I asked a lot of questions. I would really like you to answer them. I'd really like to hear from anyone watching. Alright, and we're back. So I'm just finishing off the face and adding a few last details. Gonna add in some contouring. As you can see, I've turned them into more believable characters that have a bit of story written on them. And you know, when you're creating anything, like I said, it's always important to create a narrative. Where has this person been? What have they done? There's always a story in everyone's face. I'll do a more in-depth tutorial later on shading complex shapes, specifically like faces and hands and stuff. But in the meantime, if you do have trouble with shading, I have a tutorial for that. Simple stuff for beginners. You can check it out. I'll leave a link up in the top, and I will leave a link at the end of the video as well, and in the description. So they're going to be everywhere. Just click on any one you like. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.